the beginning of 2020, I set myself the resolution to read at least one book every 2 weeks, which is equivalent to about 26 books for the whole entire year, which is probably about double what I read in the whole year of 2019. So far, I have been successful with it, and during the school year, it was definitely hard to balance school, but then on March 13th, when my school decided to move to e-learning for the rest of the year, I was like, wow, this is going to be a great time to, just focus on reading a ton, get off technology, and just have a relaxing few months. Yeah, I still use a lot of technology. So I've read a total of 7 books during quarantine so far. And I know you might be thinking, Jamie, isn't quarantine still technically going on? At least in the state I'm in of Illinois, it is still going strong. But I just did this because I had my last AP test today, so I'm done with all school. So then in 3 months, I'm going to film a video of all the books I read during summer. So I am still quarantining and social distancing, just so you guys know. So I've read 7 books in, I think it's been 9 weeks of quarantine so far, which is a little bit over a book a week, which is a pretty good rate for me. Again, that's definitely a lot faster than the 2 weeks per book limit that I had set for myself at the beginning of the year. Oh, these are really heavy. I can literally barely hold them with one hand. But this is every single book that I've read during quarantine in its physical form. This actually seems like a lot of books now. I feel like just saying 7, it's okay, whatever. But seeing them here, it's dang, I read through all of this. This is a lot of pages. I feel like I did read a pretty good variety of books over quarantine, and I'm going to be going over them in chronological order. So this first book that I read is Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. I read it in March and finished it. I think it took me a little less than a week to read. It's called Lean In, Women, Work, and the Will to Lead by Sheryl Sandberg. She is the chief operating officer at Facebook. She is a billionaire. This book is just all about women in careers and what they can do to have better work-life balance and also just have more equal opportunities in the workplace. And what really got me interested in this book is because around this time frame in March, I was doing a research project for English class all about why only 17% of Americans in the top 1% of wealth in the country are women. I don't know if that's confusing, but I heard of that and I was like, wait a minute, it should be 50% in an ideal world. But it's not the case, so I wanted to read this book to really find out why. And I do think this book was really insightful. I think I am much too young to be reading this. I'm only 16, so I think a lot of the content in it really went over my head, but it was still nice to be aware of these issues. And I'm definitely going to give this a reread in about 5 years when I'm finishing up college and about to enter the workforce. Overall, I rated this a 7.5 out of 10. It was a pretty quick read as well. The second book I read during quarantine is To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. So back when quarantine started, I don't know why, but I just had an obsession with classic books. I was I just want to know all the ideas that are in them and the themes and everything like that. So I picked this one up. It's pretty short. I think it's a little over 200 pages. It's all about the Ramsey family going to a lighthouse vacation home they had over summer break, and they have a bunch of guests there as well. And I really like the themes and ideas explored in this book, and I rated it an 8.5 out of 10. The third book I read is Principles by Ray Dalio. This is another business book. You can tell that I usually read a lot of business books. I would say the majority of books I've read this year are nonfiction relating to business. I have been mixing in a lot of fiction recently as well into my reading list because I do think there's a lot of value and truth that can be gained from fiction. But anyways, Ray Dalio is a billionaire hedge fund investor. Principles is basically his magnum opus about every single thing that he has learned, or probably not everything he's learned in his life, but basically the main takeaways that he's learned in his life and his career. So the first half of this book is pretty much Ray Dalio's life story. My cat is here. Hi, Mojo. The first half of the book is Ray Dalio's life story and just general life tips that he has for the readers, and the second half is all about work and your career, if you're running a company, all the best things that you can do to lead your team. So you can tell this book is pretty massive. It's about 550 pages, and sadly I only made it through about half the book. It's a very dense book, and I'm definitely gonna have to read the second half eventually. But yeah, I gave this an 8.5 out of 10 just because I really admire the scope that the book covers. I'm kind of embarrassed to have this next book on my list because I really did not want to read this book, guys. The day after my school closed, I went to the library, first thing it opened, and just bought, I think, probably checked out like 6 books or something to sustain me during this quarantine period. And I've also bought so many books on Amazon and borrowed books from my friends and everything like that. But this, I just was like, this just seems like the most stereotypical YA book cliche thing ever. And it really is, guys. It's called Again But Better by Christine Riccio. I mean, I literally just picked up this book. I was in the middle of reading Principles, which it was a struggle for me to get through Principles, guys. But I think this was just a nice brain break for me. I finished it in about 24 hours. And it's like a 350-page book. I give it a 4 out of 10. Do not read it unless you don't really have anything better to read. Next up, we have The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. This is a massive book. It's the longest book that I've read in a while. Maybe in my whole life. I don't know, actually. But this book is all about, it pretty much follows the life story of a boy in New York named Theo Decker, and he gets involved in a lot of different things, we'll say. Basically, the reason it's called The Goldfinch is because he steals the Goldfinch painting and it just like haunts him for all of his life. That's not like a spoiler. It's literally on the cover of the book. I did really enjoy this book. I mean, it's a Pulitzer Prize winner, and I loved how it covered the scope of like his whole life. I think there were a lot of like life truths in it, and I thought it was a very realistic portrayal of life with all the life experience I have. I gave it a 9 out of 10, and I would definitely recommend this book. The 6th book I read is Six of Crows. This is actually the sequel to Six of Crows because like my friend lent me Six of Crows, and then she wanted to reread it, so I gave it back to her, and then she lent me the sequel to it, which is Crooked Kingdom. I'm reading it right now currently. Six of Crows is a YA fantasy novel basically about this 6 group of criminals that go and try to lead a major heist. You can't really go into a YA novel, I feel like, expecting much in general. I mean, there's some YA novels that are exceptional, but Six of Crows, it was a nice little brain break. I mean, I just finished almost 800 pages of The Goldfinch. I mean, it was a nice story, and 2 of my friends that are some of the most well-read friends that I have recommended it, so I would give it around a 7.5 out of 10. And then the 7th and final book that I read during quarantine, I just finished this one just a few days ago actually, is The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. I feel like this is kind of an infamous book. This is a very old version that I borrowed from someone. It is 741 pages, so definitely not light reading by any means. It's all about the life and career of Howard Rourke, but really the main reason people read this book is because of Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism. And I mean, the main takeaways I got from this book is like, don't just like formulate your opinion based on what everyone else thinks about a topic, and really just like focus on what you want to see in the world and don't really like focus on what other people think of it. I love this book. It's definitely the best book that I've read in all of 2020. I rated it a solid 10 out of 10. That's how you know it's getting serious, guys. I mean, once I really got into this book, there was a point I was reading like 100 pages a day, but then AP testing week hit and I was only reading around like 40 or 50 pages a day. But I think would have finished this book in like a week if I didn't have AP tests, and it's 740 pages. So definitely recommend The Fountainhead. Ayn Rand also wrote Atlas Shrugged, which is like supposed to be the best book that she's ever written, so I'm excited to read it if it's better than The Fountainhead. It's almost 1,200 pages though, so I'm kind of scared of it, but I'm definitely going to read Atlas Shrugged this summer. I think quarantine's been a really great time for me to just kind of catch up on reading. The resolution I had about reading a book every 2 weeks for the whole year has been very manageable so far, obviously, since all of us have had way too much free time than we'd like to. This summer I have a couple books on my TBR list. I feel like a booktuber now. Some of the books I am excited to read this summer are Atlas Shrugged, the Secrets Trilogy by Russell Brunson, which is a series of business books. I did an unboxing on those too, so check out some of my past videos if you want to see that. I'm also planning on reading Quiet by Susan Cain. I've been recommended to this by a couple people. It's called The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Thinking or Can't Stop Talking. Also, A Little Life. This book is also kind of infamous because apparently it is rather graphic and makes people cry. Can't wait for that one. I've cried after 2 books. I cried after The Mockingjay when I read it in 3rd grade because I was just sad the series was over. And I cried after All the Bright Places. So that's kind of where I'm at. Check back in 3 months for my every single book that I read over the summer. I have about 12.5 weeks till the school year hypothetically starts, assuming that there's no like late start or anything. So I think in 13 weeks I could probably read 10 or more books, which I'm excited to do. And obviously keep uploading some new videos on YouTube. Guys, let me know down in the comments what has been the best book that you have read during quarantine, and maybe I'll add it to my summer list to read. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in one of my upcoming videos.